The scripture reading for today comes from Hosea chapter 11, verse 12 to chapter 12, verse 14. Ephraim has surrounded me with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit. But Judah still walks with God and is faithful to the Holy One. Ephraim feeds on the wind and pursues the east wind all day long. They multiply falsehood and violence. They make a covenant with Assyria, and oil is carried to Egypt. The Lord has an indictment against Judah and will punish Jacob according to his ways. He will repay him according to his deeds. In the womb he took his brother by the heel, and in his manhood he strove with God. He strove with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He met God at Bethel, and there God spoke with us. The Lord, the God of hosts, the Lord is his memorial name. So you, by the help of your God, return. Hold fast to love and justice, and wait continually for your God. A merchant in whose hands are false balances, he loves to oppress. Ephraim has said, "Ah, but I am rich. I have found wealth for myself in all my labors. They cannot find in me iniquity or sin. I am the Lord your God from the land of Egypt. I will again make you dwell in tents as in the days of the appointed feast. I spoke to the prophets. It was I who multiplied visions, and through the prophets gave parables. If there is iniquity in Gilead, they shall surely come to nothing. In Gilgal they sacrifice bulls. Their altars also are like stone heaps on the furrows of the field. Jacob fled to the land of Aram. There Israel served for a wife, and for a wife he guarded sheep. By a prophet the Lord brought Israel up from Egypt, and by a prophet he was guarded. Ephraim has given bitter provocation so his Lord will leave his blood guilt on him and will repay him for his disgraceful deeds.
All right. So if you've been here, you know we've been going through the book of Hosea, verse by verse, which is always interesting. The Old Testament is, I've said it before, it's that uncle that you are afraid to tell people about sometimes. So many Christians are afraid to speak about the Old Testament because they don't have enough experience in it, and so they look at it and they start to believe the false assumptions of the world that says, look how primitive the Old Testament is. Look at it. Look at how backwards it is. If there's a God, surely he's not angry. He must be love. You cannot have that idea and be a Christian, because the God of the Bible is love, but he's not the two-dimensional, fluffy, cultural love that we think, that just accepts everything as it is. Anyone who claims to be that kind of a love or want a God or any kind of minister of justice that way is a liar. And they're a liar because if you had a judge who forgave everybody without exacting a penalty, you would run them out of town. And so this is the God of the Bible. He is three-dimensional, not two-dimensional. And here in this passage, here's what's going on here. It's a wonderful chapter. And what he opens up in the first few verses, he tells you exactly how he's going to go forward. Within the first two verses of this passage, he uses three different words for lie. Three different words for lies, deceit, and falsehood. So it's very simple. Israel, his people, the people of God, and by the way, that means the church. He's speaking to the people here. It's easy for us to want to externalize and say, oh, the world is terrible, but the church is good. No, the church stinks. And you and I are the ones who are being addressed here, but not just us. It is a word for the entire world, but it is also for the church. We can't just externalize it and say, oh, no, we're okay, but everybody else out there is in trouble. It's not the case. And so what he's saying very plainly is, we've lied. The people of God have lied to God continually, in at least three different ways. First, in their worship. People, listen, we come every week, and I can't imagine anyone has come every week and always meant everything they have prayed and sung and said. And so he accuses Israel. He said, you come, but it's just nonsense. You come and you worship, but you don't care at all. It's just mouth honor. That's all you're giving me. So that's one way you've lied. You've offered false worship. Second one is he says, in your world, you're corrupt. In your nation, you've lied to one another. And then in your treaties with other countries, you've lied. You've said, hey, Egypt, help me against Assyria. But then when Egypt causes trouble, you then turn to Assyria and say, hey, Egypt's acting up. And he says, your falsehood has ruined the world. It's brought corruption everywhere. Your lying is It's bleeding out into all parts of your world and your society. And then the problem is here now. This is the key. He says, what's underlying all of the problems of your life and in culture is that you primarily lie to yourself. That is the core, and that is the problem he addresses in this passage so well. He says, it's self-deceit. And this passage really helps us understand how the heart has a bottomless capacity to deceive itself. Everyone in this room lies to themselves all the time. And I'm going to help try to show that and hopefully show a remedy for it. So first, what we see when Hosea is trying to help us understand our self-deception, we also learn, first of all, how we deceive ourselves, what the truth costs us, and then finally, how do we get that truth? Okay, so let's look at first that we deceive ourselves. Now, here is what self-deception is. Self-deception is this: when you and I face a truth that is so unpleasant and so uncomfortable that we have to embrace a lie in order to avoid the truth and hide it from even ourselves. And this happens, my friends, so often. I'm going to use a bunch of examples from the ones that seem quite innocent to the more tragic. Okay, so let's start with some simple ones that won't offend. Well, they'll all offend you. So one is church. Let's imagine you're a person who is at Redeemer, but you have been to every church in this city. You've been to all of them. And when I talk to you and I say, so what happened? How come you've left other churches? The answer is always the same. Oh, I don't like this they're doing there. Leadership is a mess. Leadership is a mess. And then you tell yourself, I've had 10 different churches, and they've all had the same problem. Now, the lie you believe is it's their problem. But the fact is it's you. You're the problem. And you're going to make a mess of this church too, right? And let me put it to more of a personal level. Imagine you've had 5 or 10 relationships, and you're talking to a friend, and you're recounting your woes and your love life. And then you say, you know what? I've really dated a lot of losers. Maybe you're the loser, right? Sometimes the truth, right, is so difficult that to accept it, we have to believe a lie. It's not me, it's them. Because to believe that lie, to believe the truth is so damaging to our ego, so difficult. We can't manage the cognitive dissonance that comes when we have this counter story, right? And so let's go into something a little more serious. You're at home and you get a phone call from your school, your kid's school, and they tell you that little Timmy is a bully. Your first response, yeah, Tim Hilborn is raising his arms. Yeah, you are a bully. And so imagine, now what do? Maybe your gut reaction is, it can't be, not my Timmy. Those other kids, they're probably jealous of him because he's got the best clothes, he's a better athlete, he's getting better grades. They're just vindictive and jealous. It's those kids, they're the problem. And meanwhile, you've seen at home his tendencies to bully his siblings and anyone else, and you are hiding it because you don't want to believe that you have raised a bully. And so what you do is you say, no, it's got to be them. It's not little Timmy. Yeah, he's not perfect, but he's not a bully. And so we believe the lie. It's somebody else, not me. Now let's escalate it a little bit more. This one is going to poke. It happens a lot. I speak on campuses, and we speak with people, and a lot of non-believers. And I remember I was a non-believer until I was at university, so I'm aware of the great questions of suffering, all these things. But we have people who will say to me, as non-believers, listen, I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in God. But and I say, well, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm an artist, whatever I am, a teacher. And I say, you like that job? Oh, yeah, I was born to be a teacher. Now, I can't let you off the hook with that statement. If there is no God, you were not born to be anything. If there's no God, you were not born to be a teacher. You were born to be a pile of cells that will live as long as your cells allow, and then once the free radical cells in your body break them down enough, you will die. If cancer doesn't get you first, or heart disease, or a gunman. That's life. Life without God is you were not meant to be a mom, a dad, a teacher, nothing. You were meant to be nothing because there's no meaning in a world without somebody who provides meaning. And so just accept it. Now, here's the challenge, though. You don't want to accept that because deep down, we all feel there's a meaning in life. Otherwise, you wouldn't get out of bed. So we all know there's a reason to get out of bed, even if it's just to care for my family and do my duty, whatever it is. And so rather than accept the fact that without God, there's no meaning in life, none. But rather than accept it, what we do is we say, I get it. I know there's meaning, but it's not in the church because they're all hypocrites. And the Bible's full of contradictions. You've never read the Bible, you've never studied them, you've never even gone to church and tried to love people. But I understand. We believe the lie because the truth is too hard to accept. So we make it up. We make up a story, we believe it. And now let's go from that, which is tragic enough, I think, something even more tragic. In 1945, in April 4th, the Allies were pushing through Germany, and Eisenhower, who's leading the Allied army, Dwight Eisenhower, they're liberating all these concentration camps time and again. And he and all the American soldiers and generals and the Allies are getting a little frustrated because every time they go to a new town, all they hear is, we didn't know anything was happening. How could we have known? And they would say, well, listen, just last week they marched them all through your city. They walked right through this town square. You saw what was happening. No, we didn't think that was happening. Now, so what happens is Eisenhower and one of his generals at a little place called Orduf, it's not Orduf, it's Ordruf, sorry, that's misspelled, Ordruf. What happens is he says, you know what, I'm sick of this. And he makes everybody in the town, including the mayor, go into the camp and observe what happened and then to bury the dead, to force them so they can't deny what they saw. That night, the mayor and his wife went home and hung themselves. And they left a note on the table, and the note said, we didn't know, but we knew. That's what the note said. We didn't know, but we knew. Now, what did they do? They did the same thing. Let's not be too harsh on them. Same thing we all do. We didn't know, but we knew. But we couldn't believe it, because to believe that our people would do that, to believe that I would see it and know it and do nothing about it is too much. I can't believe I'm that horrible a person because I'm a good guy. I'm a nice person. I'm a good mayor. I love my people. And so when they have this lie about themselves that they're wonderful, but the truth faces them that they weren't so wonderful, they have to believe a lie that nothing's happening behind those walls. And faced with the trouble, they could do nothing but end their lives, they thought. That is the tragedy of our lives. We lie to ourselves constantly. Now, let's turn to the passage. Let's turn to this passage in Hosea. In it's in verse 8. Look at the lie Ephraim believes. Ephraim is Israel. It's the word for Israel. It's the largest tribe in the northern kingdom, and that's just the euphemism for them. So, Ephraim, he said, or has said, but I'm rich. I found wealth for myself. In all my labors, they cannot find in me iniquity of sin. And so there's two lies. The first one, they believe that they are responsible for their own success. They are believing what they couldn't possibly know, but it's that poem that is, I know it's very popular, but it's philosophically just a nightmare. It's the poem Invictus. I am masters of my fate, captain of my soul. They believe this wholeheartedly. They say, look at my life. And by the way, when Hosea is writing, it's the 8th century BC. And Israel has just had this king named Jeroboam II. And he's done quite well. Assyria has been busy putting out fires, so they haven't had time to come and destroy little Israel. And so for those 50 years or so, it's really good. Life is good. There's the trade is prospering. Everything is doing well in there. And so they're saying, listen, we're doing well here. And not only are we doing well, we found this wealth for ourselves. I'm a self-made man. God. Don't need God. It sounds familiar for our modern context. I don't need God. Okay, God didn't go to school and get my degree. God didn't get me my job. God wasn't there with me when I was being abused as a child in my home, and I got myself out of it by my own will and made something good of my life. So I have found myself wealth. Now, here's why I will agree with one thing. You and I do work. We do things. There's no question. God didn't come and write my degrees for me, my papers. He didn't. He didn't go to the schools. He didn't get my job for me, all of that. I can appreciate what that means. But here's the thing. If you've ever spoken to people and really known people who have been poor, who are in poverty, if you've traveled on missions trips or gone to parts of the world where there's poor people and actually interacted with them and not stayed on the resort, and you dare to say to somebody in El Salvador who is struggling to survive, and you say, listen, you can make a life of yourself like I did. You know what they're going to say? They're going to laugh in your face. And do you know why they're going to laugh? Is they're going to say to you this. They're going to say, hold on, did you choose what generation you'd be born in? Did you choose to be born in Canada? Did you choose to be born to a family that actually loved you? And even if they didn't love you, did you choose to be in a country that was free and had social services available and education available? Did you choose to have a mind that would be driven to succeed? Did you choose your intelligence? Did you choose anything at all? And yet you say, I have found wealth for myself? What lie are you believing? You see, every time I hear an athlete talk about how hard they've worked, listen, you have worked. We have to work. God isn't just sitting there saying, I will give you everything. If you do absolutely nothing with your life, I will have wealth just fall in your lap. That's true. But to think that, well, the reason I'm better, imagine how silly you would laugh if a supermodel said, you don't even work at your beauty. What did the supermodel do to looking beautiful? Nothing. And so the lie they're believing is this. And listen, it's a lie. But what is the alternative? The alternative of saying I'm a self-made person is to say, well, okay, no, God did something. God was involved. God made me this. God put me at this time. God put me in this place at this time. But you see, the alternative is this. If I have no help from God, I owe him absolutely nothing. But if God was involved, if there is a God, if he made me, if he put me at this place, at this time for something, if he is the one who's given me everything, and if Christianity is true, and he has died in your place and bought you, then there is no limit to what he can ask you and which you must obey. But the cognitive dissonance is too much, because if there's a God, that means my sexuality is not determined by me, but by God. Right? If there's a God, then that means what I do with my money is not just up to me because I made it, because it's his wealth that I'm using. You see, it's almost like waking up one day and finding out that your car has been a rental car forever. And you've been treating it like your own, but now you have to give it back. And now you're like, oh man, there was rules. And I was accountable. I had this wonderful thing that was given to me, but I've been riding it like myself. And you see, it's too much. I speak to students, and whenever you talk to them, especially in this culture has every culture has a few world statements, cultural ideas, moods, I call them, because they change with feelings. And these moods at every generation make you feel like that is everything. And right now we're in a highly identity-based age. Everything's about identity. And people are willing to surrender much, but not my identity. God, stay out. And so this is the lie we believe. We don't want to believe that we are self-made, that we are not self-made. And so we believe the lie that we are, as long as we can. Now, let's go to the second lie, because I have to go quick. At the tail end of the verse 8, in all my labors, they cannot find in me iniquity of sin. And so, everything looks good on the outside, right? Everything looks good outside. And so long, I have this in my head, we have a sneaking suspicion we're not the people we should be. Everyone has had this feeling. We all do it. And no, I won't go into more detail. We all kind of know we're not the people we could be or maybe even should be at times. And so we don't want to admit it, much like we've just talked about with many other folks in many other situations. And so what we then say is, but look at my life. If there is a God, surely he must be okay with me, because I'm doing okay. My life's in good order. I know where I'm going. I have a job. I have friends. I don't have a bad life. Surely if he was angry with me, there'd be a thunderbolt, or the ground would open up and swallow me. People often joke, if I come to church, the lightning bolt's going to hit me. We have that idea. And we mistake sometimes God's grace for his acceptance. That because God is gracious with us when we are not, like parents, we're gracious with our kids even when they're not perfect. We mistake the fact that things are going well. We think it's because God approves of our lives, which biblically is entirely untrue. And so, contrary to all evidence, we believe that God, if there's a God, Carl, listen, I don't need religion, because if there's a God, he's okay with me, because I'm pretty good. I give a lot of money to support things. I serve a lot. I do all kinds of wonderful things. So thank you, but no thank you. And we will believe this lie that we are okay with God in spite of all evidence to the contrary in our lives. You see, you cheat on your wife, and you say, yeah, I'm cheating on her, but listen, the bills are paid. Listen, I haven't abandoned them. It's just my body. It doesn't matter what else I'm doing, because everything's okay there, right? It's not the real me. That's just, I'm not that bad. And so, deep down, you're guilty and you're a cad. You're a rascal. And you don't want to believe it. So you tell yourself the lie, well, as long as I keep providing for them, I'm not so bad. Not so bad. The lie keeps going. Martin Lloyd-Jones, a physician turned pastor, a Welshman, said this wonderful thing. You will never make yourself feel that you are a sinner because there's a mechanism in you as a result of sin that will always be defending you against every accusation. We are all on very good terms with ourselves, and we can always put up a good case for ourselves. I know I'm okay on my own. I don't need God. That's the first problem with Israel, that God is trying to bring their attention. You're deceiving yourself. Now, what's the cost of the truth? Now, this is wonderful. I'm going to have to be as quick as I can here. He brings up Jacob. Hosea brings up Jacob, this patriarch, this guy from Genesis 25 to 35, repeatedly in this passage. And he brings up, he doesn't really go into detail because every Jew reading this in the 8th century, and to this day, Jews are more acquainted with their Old Testaments than we are, they know the story of Jacob. So they don't have to rehash it all. But you may need a recap slightly. So he mentions it there in those parts. He mentions his birth, how he strives with God and man. He talks about his being deceived by Laban, his uncle, to get wives. We'll talk about that. And then how he's met God on a couple of occasions. Now, let me retell you the story. This is quickly, but stopping like a tour guide along the way. Jacob, his parents are Isaac and Rebekah. And Rebekah gets this prophecy from an angel that says, listen, she's worried because she's pregnant and there's a lot of turmoil in her belly. Not Mexican food. It is something else going on. And an angel tells her, listen, the reason there's trouble there is because in your belly there's twins. And they are striving because those are two nations. Those two men will become the fathers of nations. And they're striving with each other in the belly. But the younger will dominate the older. So in other words, Jacob, he's the younger. And his brother Esau, although he's older and by all ancient customs should be the one who inherits everything, it's not going to happen. It's going to be the other way around. Now, that's what she is told. When she gives birth, Jacob comes out, and Esau is first, and Jacob is hanging on to the heel of his brother. So they name him Jacob, Hebrew, which is heel grabber of the heel. Pretty simple. And now, the term comes to be known as a heel grabber, meaning a deceiver, somebody who's kind of always conniving and striving. And we know Hosea means this here. We know Hosea believes Jacob is a deceiver because he's using it here. He's using it as an example. He's saying, Israel, like you are lying to yourself, let me show you the story of Jacob. And he'll show you how you're lying to yourself and how to get over it, the only way you can get through it. And so, what does Jacob do? Well, the first thing he does is his brother Esau comes in, who's a hunter, and he's hungry, and he wants food. He's dying of starvation, he says. And so Jacob says, I know God's going to give me the birthright because I was told in this prophecy. So maybe I should just help it along a little. Remember, if you ever read Macbeth, I love Macbeth, Shakespeare. And Macbeth is told by the witches, one day king of Scotland you'll be, or king thou shalt be, and thane of Cawdor. And he decides at one point, he says, if chance will crown me, may chance crown me without my stir. So if I'm going to get it anyway, maybe it's no harm if I just help it along. Because what's the problem with that? And so this has wrongly led many people to think of Jacob as a righteous deceiver. First, that should be a problem right away when you think about those two terms. A righteous deceiver? That's like what politicians call themselves. You cannot be a righteous deceiver. If God says, I'm going to give you something, he doesn't mean he's going to give it to you through your sinning. That would be nonsense. So we know Jacob is not perfect, okay? So Jacob says, listen, I'll give you this stew I'm eating if you give me the birthright. And Esau is a bit of a donkey, bless him. He says, yeah, go for it. I'm just so hungry. Just take the birthright. I don't care. And it says, and thus Esau despised his birthright. So Esau is not an innocent party here, but Jacob deceives him to get it. Later, what's going to happen is the same thing that Jacob is going to now, when his blind father Isaac is going to bless Esau as the firstborn and kind of give over to him all of what's expected of him as the firstborn, Jacob intercedes with an elaborate ruse. Read it, you'll find it in Genesis 28. And so, Genesis 27, sorry. And he deceives him again. And he steals the blessing from Esau. And so this doesn't justify him, but it's what happens. So Jacob, of course, is now the enemy of Esau. Esau says, I'm going to kill my brother if I ever see him again. So Jacob figures this out, and he decides to flee. And the day when he's on his way, he's going to go hang out with his uncle. He's going to stay with his uncle Laban. And when he's on his way there, he encounters God for the first time. And God says, this is such an important thing. God tells him, I'm going to take care of you, Jacob. I'm going to give you all the land. Every promise I've made, I'm going to give you. In fact, he says directly, I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So it's clear, Jacob, I'm going to do everything I say. Only a few verses later, Jacob doesn't really want to take this on faith. He does what sadly too many of us does. Listen to what Jacob says. If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. See, God says, listen, I'm going to give it all to you. And he says, I don't know if that's true, so I'm going to wait. And if you do all the things you say, then I will serve you. Jacob is bargaining with God like he's been bargaining with everybody else. That's what he does, because what's the cost? He wants me to surrender everything to him. He wants me to trust a God I can't even see. When he comes through, then I will. Sound familiar? It should, because most of you said it. We all have. That's what Jacob's doing. Let's keep moving, because he says more. He then goes to his uncle's house, Laban, and he finally meets a guy who's as much of a scoundrel as him. And Laban, he meets a relative named Rachel, and he falls in love with her. He says, I want Rachel for my wife. And her father, who's Jacob's uncle, says, yeah, you can have her, but you have to work it off. So come and work with me and be part of the family. So Jacob does this for 7 years, and then he gets married. But he finds out he was deceived by Laban. He marries the wrong girl. He gets the weak-eyed Leah, which means she wasn't much of a looker, it seems, or something. Something about her was not marryable. And so he gets her, and Jacob is angry, because anything, one thing a shyster hates more than anything is another shyster. And he can't stand it. And so he says, well, you've wronged me. So Laban says, let's not part angry. Spend more time working, and then I'll give you Rachel. So he does. 7 more years, he gets Rachel. Now he has both. And then he says, well, I've worked all this time and I have no wealth. I want to go back home, but I need something. So he spends 6 more years working as a shepherd. And this is just a comedy of deceit, if we read it. It's both him trying to figure out, Laban trying to find a way to not give him any wealth for all his work, and Jacob conniving to try to get as much of it as he can. Yada, 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 which means you know in Hebrew, by the way. So yada, yada, yada. Jacob gets enough. He has enough flocks and wealth now that he can leave. And he is told by God, now go home again. So he decides to move home. But when he realizes, what if Esau's still angry? Yeah, it's been 20 years, but grudges are pretty big. And so what if he's still angry? So he gets right to the border of Esau's land at the river. It's a stream called Jabbok. So he gets there. And when he's there with all of his wealth and his household and everything he owns is there in this caravan, he sends messengers. He says, I'm going to go test out Esau. He sends servants up, and the servants come back and say, yeah, we talked to him, and he's coming with 400 men. So now Jacob's like, oh, crud. Now what? So he doesn't know what to expect. So he does what Jacob always does. He finds a way. He says, okay, I'm going to split everything up into 2. That way, if Esau attacks, while he's killing everything in the first part, the rest can escape. At least I'll have something. And then that night, he decides, I better go even further. Let me try to appease him. And then he sends him this with more servants. I'll read it because I don't. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 camels, 40 with their calves, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He sends all of this ahead with a message saying, Jacob, your servant is here, Esau. In other words, trying to be humble. Take this stuff. Now, he lays down, he starts thinking, he prays, and he realizes, I better do more. So he sends another envoy, but this time he sends his servants, his wife, and his kids ahead of him. They cross the Jabbok, and listen to this beautifully tragic line in 32, 23, and 24. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had, and Jacob was left alone. Now, look what's going on here. Jacob is willing to sacrifice everything for his life. I'll give you my wealth. I'll even give you my wife and kids. Just don't kill me, Esau. See? You see how deceptive? I will give everything. I will give everything, but I will not give myself. That's the last thing. And what happens that night? That night, he's alone, and God shows up. An angel comes, and it says the angel wrestled with him all night. And as they wrestle, The angel makes clear at the very end, Jacob never stood a chance because he just touches him apparently in the hip somewhere and he disables him. And he's to show Jacob, you had no chance of winning. You're wrestling. You're refusing to submit to God. You're refusing to submit. You're not humble. You're a donkey. You're refusing. And look, you have no chance of winning. I just showed it to you. By hitting your hip, you're done. And Jacob hangs on nonetheless with his arms, and he says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Now, what is happening? Jacob finally sees something. He's finally realizing that he cannot deceive his way out of this. He cannot, he has to see this. Half measures and giving God a little won't work. You must give God all or you will not live at all. That's the answer. And people say, well, I'm living just fine without God. Are you? And what happens when your eyes close on this world like the rest of us? And I know you're struggling with that question, especially as you get older, because everyone does. And so finally, Jacob realizes something. I can't lie my way out of this. There's no other way. He had deceived and been deceived all this time. And we are all like Jacob. The nearer God gets, maybe even in the room, the nearer God gets to you, you're willing to sacrifice. You'll give him anything. You'll pacify God with anything. Fine. Okay, there's a God. I'll give him my money. That's good, right? Because that's the highest value in the world. So if I give God my money, then I'm showing how much I love him, right? I'll give him the money. That's not enough? I'll serve. I'll be a part of the church. I'll be on the baptism. I'll be on the board. I'll do whatever you want. I'll serve. I'll even offer my kids to serve on the worship team, anywhere. But you won't give yourself. What has to happen, the only way to get to the truth is if you wrestle with God and he submits you and forces you to see that you cannot live apart from him. That's the only hope. And he's saying this to Israel as well. Israel, Assyria is coming, and they're going to invade and exile you and crush the entire place. There's hope for you in Judah, but you must be like Jacob. If you're going to be like Jacob as a liar, be like Jacob in repenting. Do both. Don't just persist. So he's offering a warning, and that's the same warning we all have. Now, let's go to the end. How do we get this truth? There's one more meeting that he doesn't really mention, Hosea, necessarily. He's kind of cryptic. He doesn't really say exactly everything he's talking about Jacob's life. So in chapter 35 of Genesis, he meets God again. But what's interesting is this time there's no bargain. Jacob is told, go and do this, I'm coming. And then when he turns to his people, he does no conniving. All he says is, get ready, God's coming. That's all he says. There's no conniving, there's no bargaining. He now understands something. And then God says this most beautiful thing to him. And you've probably read it. If you're a Christian, you've read it, and you may not have understood the gravity of it. But in Genesis 35:11, God blesses him and says this to him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. Does that sound familiar? That's what he says to Adam and Eve, right, in the garden. Why? He's citing the blessing at creation to Adam and Eve because this is what's happening. We just saw it with baptisms, that when you submit to God, you have new life. It's a new start for you, Jacob. Now go, be fruitful and multiply. That old life you had, you still have the experiences. God will make things out of that life. He will turn those things that you thought were horrible into tools to make you better. That old life is dead and buried, but now there's a new life. Go and be fruitful and multiply. You have God's blessing now to grow because you've submitted and said, fine, I can't rule my own life. I need God to do it. And when you finally give God everything, and when he wrestles that lie out of you that you can live apart from him and still live, you get new life. And the pain and the shame and the lies of the old life disappear. Now, how do you get that? Well, the chapter we just read, that Karen read, it ends here with verses 13 and 14. By a prophet, the Lord brought Israel up from Egypt, and by a prophet, he was guarded. Ephraim has given bitter provocation, so his Lord will leave his blood guilt on him and will repay him for his disgraceful deeds. Now, what's he talking about? He's talking about Moses. When Israel's in Egypt, the prophet who leads them out is Moses. And what's interesting is Moses will later say in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, 15 to 19, he says, listen, Israel, God is going to send a prophet like me. And when he does, you got to listen to everything he says. Everything. Obey it, no matter what. And then, is it any accident that in Matthew chapter 2, 1,500 years later, we then have Matthew taking this line out of Hosea chapter 11, verse 2, and talking about Jesus, he says, out of Egypt I called my son. Why? What's Matthew doing? Why is he applying this to Jesus? This is why. Because Matthew is writing to Jews and he's telling them, listen, Israel has failed. Israel has failed to be the people God wanted them to be, and they now deserve exactly what sinners and everyone who is wrong, any criminal gets, which is punishment. So, rather than crush them, which they deserved, God says, I will take my son out of Egypt, Christ, and he will be the Israel that you should have been. He is the true Israel. And because he came and died, lived the life they should have lived, died the death that they deserved, they can receive the mercy that Christ bought for them by his faithfulness. That is the only possible way to be at peace with God and with yourself. The only way. And look at Jacob. Jacob says, I'm going to send all these things forward, and I just read it, to Esau so that he will, what did I say? I'll just read it. I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. Christ has gone ahead of you. When you now approach God, Christ goes before you so that God sees his son and says, yeah, you've been a scoundrel, Carl, but my son obeyed perfectly on your behalf. And so long as when you see God, please, everybody in this room, you will one day be face to face with a just and holy God. And when you are, if he happens, I don't know what's going to happen. But if he says, why should you be here? Don't you dare say because I was good. Don't you dare say because I helped little old ladies across the street, or I gave to Greenpeace, or I marched with the right people. Instead, you say, I do not deserve it, but I have one who died on my behalf, and for that reason I deserve to be let in, because of his work, not my own. That's the Christian response. It's the only way. Jacob had to get to that place, and God is hoping Israel will get to that place. And so, Christians, and not just Christians, skeptics, everybody in this room, God is wrestling with you, trying to get you to surrender your whole life to him. But you're like a boat in a storm. You're going to throw everything overboard just to stay alive before you throw yourself over. You will throw it all over. You'll give God anything. Every one of us has some room in our house that we leave locked. You may say, I love church, so I'm going to go to the church down the road that is okay with my sexual choices. Or I'm going to go to the church down the road that is okay, and they don't worry about whether or not my family is doing well. They don't care how I live. They just want me to show up and pay. You go to those churches. You can. You shouldn't, but you can. But God is saying, come. You see, you're under the impression, and you believe this other lie, that you can look after your life better. And if you accept Christ, you're going to lose friends, family, money, reputation, all these things. All we worry about is what we'll lose. And so we say, I can't do it. I can't. And Christ is saying what I think a guy named George MacDonald said quite well. George MacDonald, an old writer, Scottish writer, says, I would rather be what God chose to make me than the most glorious creature that I could think of. For to have been thought about, born in God's thought, and then made by God is the dearest, grandest, and most precious thing in all thinking. That is what's offered to you. Christ alone. There's no hope outside of him. Let's pray. Father, thank you, Lord. Lord, we continue to lie. I mean, you don't need to be, these folks don't need all be Christians to know that. We all know we're liars. And deep down we know it. And Father, the problem is without you, we just keep heaping another lie upon another lie. And we always want to think it's the other group. It's the red party or the blue party that is the enemy. When in fact, no, the enemy is us. Lord, we are our greatest problem. And so, Father, help us to see it. Love us enough to bring us face to face with our sin. And then love us enough as well to open our hearts to you, God. As hard as that is, let us strive for you, God. And then when we come to you, do it. I don't even need to say it because I know you will. But all through Scripture, whenever people submit to you, you don't crush them. You're not like us, and you say, "Well, now wallow in your misery." Instead, you never even that woman at the well. You didn't say you've lived a horrible life. Instead, you just loved her when she confessed. That's all you do, Lord. And I pray you do the same and encourage those who are even now, Christians or not, saying there's a place in my life I haven't submitted to God. I want to keep this to myself all these years. Father, I pray that you would be working on them now. And God, show them the incredible grace that you have and remind them of those beautiful words from that old William Cowper hymn that says, to see the law by Christ fulfilled and to hear his pardoning voice transforms a slave into a child and duty into choice. Father, you are glorious and good. We praise you this morning, and we love you, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.